If you're aged in your 50s, your 60s or 70s, you might not realise it, but the power of numbers in your age group have shaped politics, society and superannuation for more than 30 years. But that is changing with every single passing day. The latest census shows the same number of millennials in society as there are baby boomers. Now, to work out what that means, I spoke with demographic thinker Bernard Salt.
Well, there's no doubt that the time of the coronavirus will signal, I think, it's almost like a bookend. It's signalled a shift in the structure of Australian society, with the baby boomers having reigned or dominated perhaps for the last 30 years or so, often in the workplace, certainly in politics and so forth. But from the time of the coronavirus onwards, you'll see the baby boomers actually subside and their influence wane over the 2020s and then continue to decrease. We all know where this is heading in the 2030s or so. In many ways, it's the natural way of things. One generation rises, another generation recedes, and that time where the baby boomers really start to recede, especially from the workplace, is before and after the coronavirus. And I will say also that I think that is accentuating the skills shortage at the moment, with baby boomers, teachers and nurses and other people making a decision after the coronavirus that now is the time to retire, and that is simply accentuating the skills shortage.
So Bernard, in today's society, just who are the baby boomers? What do they represent?
Well, the baby boomer generation comprises today a bit under 5 million people. They were born between 1946 and 1964, and they started to move into the retirement stage of the life cycle in 2011, and they'll be completely into the retirement demographic, if you like, by the end of the 2020s. This was the generation that really created youth culture in the 1960s. Might be a bit hard to imagine at the moment, but they were quite rebellious in their teenage years. They tried to avoid going to Vietnam. Of course, that was the great cause of the late 1960s. By the 1980s, they had settled down, they were partnering up, and they created the concept of yuppies and dinks. There was a social movement that was attached to baby boomers in the 1980s. The late 1990s, early 2000s, they were then in their 40s and 50s, and the sea change and tree change movement was very important. So at each stage of the life cycle, when they were teenagers, when they were 20-somethings, when they were 40-somethings, and now when they're 60-something, they have shaped society. And of course, over the next decade, as they move into their 70s and 80s, they're going to place extraordinary pressure on aged care, servicing and facilities. So you can't produce a generation of that scale and not shape each stage of the life cycle through which they pass. And they're going to be around for a little while yet, impacting the way we think about what we now call old age, but I think it'll become very politically incorrect to refer to someone as old by the end of the 2020s.
And what about the millennials? How will they seek to change the future?
Well, you could also argue that the 2020s is the time in which the millennial generation really find their feet. This is a generation that is now moving from their mid-30s to late 30s, early 40s. By your late 30s, you're partnered up, you have 1 or 2 kids, your partner has gone back to into the workforce. I think that the millennials are actually moving from their inner city apartment phase of the life cycle to, in fact, middle suburbia and outer suburbia. If you have, or starting a family, if you've got kids, you kind of need 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a front yard, a backyard and a Zoom room. And it's also the time in the life cycle, late 30s, early 40s, as we will see in the 2020s, when the millennials pass through that stage of the life cycle. That's when you really start to move up the corporate ladder, and you start to create and build businesses, and you move to the stage of being senior managers, or even the managing director of a business, or the CEO of a business. You could argue that the 2020s is the millennials' time in the sun. And so, yes, they will be exercising quite a significant amount of consumer power as well. There is a theory that you never spend as much money in any year of your life as you do at the age of 42, because you've got kids and families, commitments and housing and so forth. and you've got this entire generation of millennials, 5 million people, passing through that stage of the life cycle. So household formation, home buying, home improvement would be certainly businesses to be in. And this is the time of the millennials when you think about it.
So it's clear that baby boomers have shaped their world. Contraception, technology, seeing the world. In that way, do you sense the millennials will see the world differently from their parents?
There is no doubt that the millennial generation in their 30s and into their 40s, I suspect, have a different attitude to work and life. What is important to them, climate change, of course, very important issue. They have a very strong civic conscience, and they don't want to work for an organisation just for pay and conditions. They want to be involved in a workplace that has meaning. They want to feel that they are making a contribution to society. So I think they're very civic-minded, and there's a search for meaning in the kind of work that they are pursuing. They're also looking to shift the way workplace value is delivered, not necessarily in the workplace. And I think work from home has been, in many respects, very liberating for this generation. There is no way that a millennial in their late 30s, early 40s will want to go back to the drudgery of commuting an hour into the workplace and an hour home 5 days a week for the next 30 years of their career. They will say they're not doing that. There is a better model. And so what we're looking for from the millennials is not just this very strong civic conscience, this pursuit of meaning, if you like, but also the development of a better lifestyle, a better quality of life. And as we all know, Australia offers a wonderful quality of life, but the drudgery of the daily commute really has been addressed, or is being addressed, with work from home. The millennial generation, I suspect, will grab this concept and from the pandemic, and they will not let go. They are going to incorporate this into the Australian lifestyle going forward. And I think at the end of the day, this delivers a better quality of life for workers. I think the pursuit of meaning gives people a sense of purpose. And also, of course, their commitment to climate change, all of that also, I think, makes a great contribution to society.
And with that political power, do you also sense that millennials might try to change other things, especially around the workforce and laws and taxes around superannuation?
I do think that with the baby boomers moving into retirement, so 4.5 to 5 million baby boomers moving into retirement, we've never had that volume of people any time in history moving into retirement relative to the number of workers. Generally, if you go back 80 years or so, life expectancy in Australia was mid to late 60s, so you only have a very short retirement. These days, you could actually have, the average retirement, if you retired at 65, you could actually live for another 20 years or so, although most Australians actually tend to retire in their late 50s. So that's, 20, 25 years in retirement is a long time in retirement, and you're drawing down on superannuation and government services and in order to maintain your quality of life. The questions will come as to how we can maintain that quality of life going forward. And yes, I expect there will be many debates regarding taxation and equity and so forth across the 2020s as we manage this transition where the baby boomers move out of the workforce and into the retirement and lifestyle stage of the life cycle.
Bernard Salt, it's always good to get your insight. Many thanks for your time today.
Thanks very much, Ross.